Welcome back, class. Now, as we get started with today's assignment, I'm going to be talking about some of the same things I talked about with you guys when I saw you in class on Tuesday. On Tuesday, we talked a lot about where we were going with the class after doing all of the ideas of structural drawing. Now we're going to be involved with light and shadow is what's going to take our attention. So next to me is what I have is a little still life. The little still life, I have it lit underneath. With this assignment, you have two parts to it. This is the first part. The first part of it is you're going to pick two light objects. If they're white, all the better. But if you don't have two white objects, two objects that are rather light in value. And as what we're going to be doing, as I mentioned in class, we're going to sketch it out, and then we're going to separate light from shadow. And we're going to reduce all of the values we see up here to only two values. So I gave you handouts on this in the class, and you can right now refer to those handouts. And from reality is what will happen is, in a moment, I'm going to start sketching this old doll, and I've got the ball, I've got it lit from underneath. If you can light yours from underneath, definitely do the first one this way. The reason for it is it's connecting shadows to the wall, and it's melting things together. So besides using all one dark, the other thing that we're going to do, of course, of using all one light, which is going to be the light of your paper. In my case, since there's charcoal on here, I'll have to take an eraser and lift the lights off of it, okay? But you guys don't have to do that. The other thing that we're going to watch for is edges. When you look at this, even within the shadows, there's edges. We're going to get rid of those edges, as you're going to see. It's one of the reasons I'm wanting to do this demonstration, is to show you how to get rid of these edges. And we will work with edges that are sharp, like you see here, if it's a strong turn of form, or they're going to be soft, a form shadow. So we talked about this in class. So as a light is going from light to darker to darker to darker, you get a change of value where it most abruptly turns, but it's soft because it's gradually turning. Other places will be sharp, like where it is here, the dark underneath his head. It's more of a stronger turn of form because of the fold. Sharp edges, cast shadows, sharp edges. I don't have too many cast shadows on this thing from something else, so most of my cast shadows are in the background and along edges. Those are going to have sharp edges. Everything else is going to have soft edges. I have to get an eraser. Got to step out of your focus for a moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start. Ultimately, this is going to be in a frame of reference, but I'm going to start it not being in a frame of reference. And feel free to do that yourself. I'll talk about why that's going to be in a minute. We talked about axis lines. My axis line is this way, so I'm trying to think of that axis through the shape. So don't forget all the things we've talked about. I see a form there, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a back to its head just by kind of overlapping the shape. So I'm going to get a turn here so I can begin to see that there's an angle, and to the front of this character's face there's a turn. Now I've got a front and I've got a side. You might not see this too clearly. I'll make it a little stronger so you can. So now I've got a plane to it. So we talked about forms. Now I've got a simple form. So on this side, his body is shrunk. I am going to measure and see roughly where it is. So I'm going to start with another shape. So this shape, similar to the other one, I am going to turn it ever so slightly. I see a turn to it, meaning his waist is this way. And because of that, there's tops to the shoulders. So I'm using another plane break where I see the shadow here. So I can begin to think that this might come down this way. The arm's going to come over this way. And I'm going to get a loose feel for this. I do have to check where this arm is and how far out from his head. I don't think I have it out far enough, so make adjustments. The top of the arm is going to be here, so what I'm going to do is pull it over a little more. So I'm following the shadow edge, basically, is what I'm thinking as I set this up, which can allow me to move this over just a little bit more. Anyways, on this side, I see that there's an edge here, so there's a little bit of a side plane. So I'm just going to block that out. Here's my center line. Now my center line, I want to try to get, here's our cross contour line. I see it coming out. All of you might see it a little bit from the front. So I'm going to try to get a sense for the drawing of it before we begin to do anything with shading. So anyways, from this side, I'm going to place this leg all in shadow. I'm going to place it in loosely. The top part here, it comes out a little bit. There's a shadow up there. This thing's growing. Drawing's getting bigger than I thought it would, but I think you guys can still see it. This part of his leg, I am going to check where I've got it, check verticals. And so my vertical is here. So it's telling me I'm going to watch this center just to make sure I'm in the right spot. And it looks like it's pretty close. So where I was off is because of the perspective, I pulled that over too much. So I'm glad I checked. It'll keep me now in the right place. So keep checking yours. It's easy for these things to happen. There's a front, there's a turn to the leg on his hip. I want to we work with straight lines. I'm going to use all those techniques now, which I want you to do. Straight line to pull it out. So I'm going to think of straight line, which means plane. I'm going to think of another straight line, so that's going to help me draw this. So now I know there's kind of a surface up here, right? And there's a turn here. That's why ultimately there's going to be a shadow. This edge that I'm drawing, I'm going to make it a little more steep. This leg, I'm going to leave it about there. And now I'm going to check where the ball is. I'm looking at my angle is this way. Of course, yours is this way, so it's a little different. So mine, where is the bottom of the ball? Very important. Bottom of the ball seems to be here. Okay. So now I've got roughly where the bottom of the ball is. Where's the top of the ball? Again, relational measurement. Bring it across. I have something to judge off of. It came as high as this. Then the question is, if it is as high as this for me, I'm going to check it again. Actually, it's a touch lower, not much. Say about here. So if it's that high and this low is what I have to now find is my center. The other thing I have to find is how far is it from the leg. So it's touching the leg. So if this is right, then this distance should equal this distance, should equal this distance, and should equal this distance because it's a ball, it's round. So all of these should be about equal. So that's one way if you do use a ball in yours. Styrofoam ball as a white object is a nice thing to use. So all of those seem to be right now. So now with that in mind, I could begin to think of an arch and begin to think of another arch and another arch and another one. And we can roughly get that in place. Now I'm going to check it because I'm way off to the side and it doesn't look right to me. Okay, so I can see this side comes out a little too far. And so I'm going to kind of now neaten it up a little bit. So go after those sorts of curves. So if that's right, then this distance should equal that. According to this, it does. On this little doll that I'm drawing here, I'm going to watch this angle that I have. I'm looking at it again to make sure it's right. So I'm going to place that in. That's better. I do see a little bit of an arm, but it's in perspective. So I have to be careful. It's coming out like this, and it's turning down. So that's now a completion of the other side. Those shapes now for me, at least from my angle, look pretty close. I'm going to bring this through, and I'm going to kind of make this a little cleaner. Okay. Now, with that in mind, is what I'm going to do is put a frame of reference here. Now, my intention is to use this shadow. So that's why I'm bringing it up to where I'm bringing it. This is why I'm having you put the frame of reference on after you draw it. So what I need is, I don't need a lot of room on this side. I will use that shadow. So I'll probably bring it down to what I have here. On the bottom, I am going to complete a little bit of what it's all sitting on. So for me, the corner, when I bring it up on a vertical line, it's going to be different for you, but for me, it's here. So I, again, take those alignments. You have to use them. So, because it's very tricky if you don't. So I'm doing it that way. How low is the corner? I keep it parallel to my eyes. I know it's different for you, but for me, when it's parallel to my eyes, it comes almost to the bottom of this leg. So I can bring this up ever so little. So that located my corner, okay, through my relational measurements. I've got it now lined up. So when I'm looking at this next line, this angle for me should be pretty accurate when I place it in. It's going to come, if this is the middle of my ball, middle of the ball, so it's the little edge of the top part of it for me sticks out like that. So this should roughly be the angle. It looks pretty close. So I'm going to strike it in. So I'm going to do that with it. And then this is going to hit the leg about here. So this is going to come this way. Place those in. I get another top of it coming through there. And so I'm going to watch the negative space and how big it is. And I'm going to place that in there. My drawing in here still isn't just right. For some reason, everything in me wants to move this leg to the right, and it wants to, in reality, move the other direction. So watch those things. I want the thickness of the top of that because I'm going to use that value. So the thickness, it would get narrower here and wider here. So this would go back narrow, wide. This then is going to connect this way. The leg, I want it to come a little bit below, so this might be a little long, but I'm going to do it that way anyways. In reality, this comes up. But I'm going to keep it the way I've got it just because of the sake of time. Well, maybe I won't. Okay. I'm not going to put down all of these things underneath it. The top of it would be adequate for what I need. So this is the first step that you're going to do. The only other thing I'm going to do for my first step is break up this on his head just a little bit. I like that detail. So I'm going to go over that. It would go this way and then cross the side of it. So try to get a sense for the curve. I'm going to place a little bit of detail on here. There's a concave. Again, at the very beginning of the class, I talked about using convex, concaves, concave, convex. This would connect. So I'm looking at how this connects this way. And then from my side, which you don't see from your side, I see a little bit of this top, concave, convex. And so I'm going to use that in here. Okay. The next stage of this, I'm going to place another detail, which is the eyes, because they're dark shapes on a light for the most part. I want to place roughly where they are. This is the bottom of them. For me, this is so in perspective. So I don't see much. I see a curve about like that, and then this one is over here, and I see it bigger and wider than the other one. Okay. So what I've got to watch because of the perspective I put it in, I've got to watch that angle and that angle. If you do something where there's a face or whatever, watch those angles. I'm going to put a little bit of the curve on this face because ultimately it's going to be a little bit of a detail. Now, the next step is to outline shadows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch where the shadow on the wall is. Now, I made this low purposely so my shadow can run off. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to watch how far is the shadow away from his head, and I'm going to place that. And then I'm going to put a little bit of shape to this, where it comes out and then rolls over. So there's difference from here to here, so it looks interesting. Well, I'm going to watch my thicknesses of shadows. With a design, everything wants to have variances of shapes, narrow, wide, one angle, different angle. So I'm going to search for those subtle differences. The shadow of this arm is now way up here. When I bring it across, it's kind of at his eye, so I think I'm pretty close to it. I'm going to bring that around. I'm always watching shapes. Now, it's all we got to work with in these designs is shapes of shadows, shapes of light, and I'll complete that rectangle in just a moment. Shapes of shadows, shapes of light is what we got to look for. So I need these shapes when you put them in. I need you to do an amazing job with them. In other words, do what I'm doing. Watch the differences, narrow, wide. Look for differences because in the end, you're only going to have these shapes. And if those shapes don't look good, then you miss the designing stage of values. And as I mentioned in class, everything with values starts off first as a design, second as modeling. So I'm going to try to take my time and watch where these connect. I am going to just lighten this up a little bit so that you see what I'm doing, even though it'll all be in shadow there in a minute. So there it goes. Now, this is the tip of his arm. And so underneath, I want to watch exactly where the shadow is, and if I can make it interesting as much as I can. So I'm going to place it there, and it comes down wide, and then it gets narrower, narrower, narrower. So there's my shadow that goes around. This side, I am going to clip it here. I know I'm probably in your way, but I'm just going to do this boldly. I'm going to put that there. So there's my frame of reference. All of yours needs a frame of reference. If there's a table that goes all the way across, put it. Mine's just the way I've got it, so that's how I'm going to leave it. Shadow coming this way. Now, I am going to place a shadow on the ball. I'll make this a little darker just so all of you can see it well. The shadow here, as all of you can see it, I'm going to reduce it to convex concave, so it comes up like this, and it's starting about my midway, I would say, and it comes up. Now, these curves are important, so really begin to watch them. If I start this too straight, it's going to be flat. So I'm purposely trying to get a really high curve, really high, pulling up as high, and even if you need to exaggerate it. So this is going to follow through like this, and I'm just going to simplify it into this. So from my side, there's a little shadow here, but I'm going to edit it. I'm going to take artistic license because I like the leg being dark up against the ball being light. So in that case, I'm going to get rid of a little bit of the cast shadow under here purposely. So if you need to edit some things for the benefit of the drawing, we do it. Okay. So now we've got that in place. Now, what I'm going to begin to do is place the shadows here. For the most part, I'm going to keep it real simple. The arm's in shadow, most of it. I'm going to try to get the feel of the curve of the arm. So I'm drawing now, again, where the shadow meets the light. In the class, I talked about this as shadow mapping when I saw you on Tuesday. This leg gets lost to this. But I am going to take my time in certain places, like here. I'm going to go underneath, and I'm going to place where the shadow is, and I am going to connect it to a little bit of my top plane here. I'm going to put a line, and I'm going to pick up very little bit of feeling of the folds, very little, just so that we know in reality there's probably some folds there, and so I might bring it around ever so subtly like this. This is my shadow mapping. On this side, I'm going to pick up a fold off of this plane break right here. So I'm trying to strategically come up with some places, and all of you can see that shadow that I'm using. There's a little bit of light in it. In this case, I'm going to keep it. Usually I would just get rid of that, but in this case, I'm going to connect and leave that light. I'm going to leave it a little bigger than what it is, and I'm going to place this whole side in shadow like this. This object is very curved on the bottom, his leg, so I'm going to pick up a curve right there. So anyways, the shadow mapping is almost in place. On his head, this side's in shadow for me. And there's a little light ridge there that I'll probably keep. And then underneath, it's all in shadow for the most part, probably all the way down to here. And so I'm going to bring it in a little bit across, I'll leave a little light, and across his shoulder where I made the plane break, all of that is now in shadow. Okay, now it brings us to our third part of this process. I'm going to go through, this is the edge of his arm, but is what I'm going to do, just so that I don't hold on to that edge, I'm going to get rid of the arm, where the arm was. And I'm going to get rid of this side of his head, and I'm going to get rid of this side of his head, because this is what's going to tell me everything that's in shadow. So that's all in shadow. It's my new line there, my new edge. This part's in light. I got to be careful with that. This is all in shadow, so this all goes away. And his arm, of course, place it in here a little darker so you can see it. That's going to remain dark. This part coming across will remain dark. So it'll start to make some sense in a minute, but I'm going to connect all of this together. This is light to light, so I'm going to connect this together. These are two light areas for me. I'm going to link those together. So to start to show you with this, I'm going to take this broad charcoal. You're going to use charcoal as well. And if you want to be safe with your shapes, I'm going to make this maybe a little darker than you might with your first consideration. I'm going to place down these darks into the pattern I created. So I'm going to follow it around like this, connecting it together. Now I left a light here. I am going to go back and I'm going to just try to make it a little lighter so you can see it. I left a light right there for the side of his head because I see a light under it, a reflective light. So I'm going to connect it. This I'm going to just make very light. So what will happen is this is all in shadow. This in shadow. Rub it. Take, if you have one of those blending stumps, use it. Yours, of course, won't be as big as this. This will come across. I am going to add a little bit of shadow into this light now because they're wonderful little shapes that I want to kind of use. Okay, so now we've got that. With his eyes, I am going to darken them. And I'm going to darken where I see it. Now, we're using two values. In his eyes, I see more than two values. You're not going to use those. It's tempting to want to go in there darker and place those in. But I'm not going to do it. I'm going to fight the temptation. This is my light coming through. I'm connecting it through here. Okay, so a little bit of light there. This is now into the fold underneath his head. I'm going to go this way with it. So the fold that's under here, I'm going to make a dark shape, connecting this together. This now on this side is all in shadow for me. And I'm going to decide how I want to bring it up. I might not bring it all the way to the top, but I'm going to bring it up and around like this. And that's going to be an important part of the whole design. So these edges, again, all lost. I'm coming up with new patterns. This is the little light coming from the folds. However, this does connect together right here. So I'm going to let that connect so it begins to look, again, very abstract. It should if you're doing it right. This all now connects. This connects to the top of the ball. This, his leg is gone. His arm is gone. So I'm just going to kind of go pretty boldly at it. I'm going to suggest that those little bits of folds in there. Because what I'm going to do is, oops, that's not going to work. This takes a minute to lay this out, but I want to take the time to show you guys this because there's certain things in a minute with the edges I have to have you consider. So this part of it, as you can see, is very broad, very bold. It's more work, like labor, if you will. But is what's going to be so important is the shapes and the edges. And the shapes just have to be as nice as you can make them, as beautiful as you can get them. And the edges are going to be absolutely crucial. And that's what's going to take a moment now. Once I get the shadow in place, I can show you that. But you want to take your time with these shadows. Do not throw them together, because everything else is going to depend on it. But what I'm going to do is watch how my shadow moves through here. It connects, and it's going to connect to this side. So all I got left is a little bit of the light on that arm. All this connects together. So it's all that's left is the front edge. Now you're going to see this light on the arm a little bigger than I do, because I'm from the side of it. So we connect it. So you're going to have these wonderful little abstract shapes in the end. Now I'm going to lift this out a little bit. Put a little bit of the curve that was there that I lost in the smudging of it. But from my angle, that's what I get. The top of the arm is lost. The side is lost. This is all her hip. It's all lost. And this in here will come around. There is a connection to my background here, and it's crucial that I get it in to the hand. It connects right through. So that shape does that in the end. I get it right. Okay. This connects to the shadow outside of her leg. So what's happening is I lost her hip, so it gives it a very different look to it ultimately. But this is how it starts. Let these happen. Let these distortions take place. If you do it right, it will have a very abstract feel to it in the end. There's a shadow here. I do want to connect it to this one. It's an isolated shape. Usually we don't use a lot of isolated shapes, so I'm going to connect it to this. Isolated shapes just look like polka dots. I will put a few polka dots on there because they're darks on light, so I'll use them. Is what I'm going to do in here now is separate the top of what everything's sitting on. So again, take your time with edges. Bring these values right up against them. The value on the inside needs to be smooth. It doesn't want to be full of strokes and lines and all of that stuff. It wants to be even, because how this comes up against the ball sharp is important. If it's soft, that's going to be important. So all of this is going to be important. So now we almost got our pattern in place. I'm going to go back and I'm going to watch a few things. This edge is sharp where her leg meets this dark. I would take the care, this is lost, I would lose it. I would take the care of now going back and watching edges. This edge is not sharp at all. I have it sharp. So what you do is you go back in this direction and soften it. So it's suggesting a slow curve. This, where the fold is here, very soft. This is very sharp. So then I go back in. You don't want to lose the light shape. You want to leave room. Like I just about lost that. So I've got to go back and watch where the sharp edge is up in front. And then I got to keep like that. The top soft. This is soft because it's turning slowly. That's sharp. So you want to go back and you want to watch your edges. Wherever they're soft, make them soft. Wherever they're sharp, make them sharp. Take your time. This is a sharp edge. This is all about edges now. I'm not going to add any other darks that are in there. I'm just going to now sharpen my edges, keeping this value all the same, even though my temptation I would love to separate this and bring that hip out and bring this back so this would make sense, but I'm not going to do that. So we're going to come in here. I'm just going to finish this up quickly. I'm going to try to lighten this up a little bit. It won't lighten up a lot, but I'll be able to get it a little bit for you. The inside of this leg, it starts very sharp here. In the end, down here, it's very soft. It's even a subtle shadow on it, and my light actually is in the middle. So I would somewhat lose that edge, of course, and I would keep this. I would have to work those edges. This, very soft edges, so it's a form shadow. Do not lose the curve at all. This curve, do not lose the curve. Try not to get it straight. Again, where it's sharp, you want the edges to be sharp. So down here, I'd have to take the time. I'm not going to do it now just because I'm running out of time. But you want these edges sharp and these soft. So you go through the entire drawing that way. So what I'm going to do, since with this object, it's so nice to have darker shapes on light as these polka dots go, I'm going to add some of them in terms of where they might be in the process here. Put them in because it's a dark on light. That's a design idea that artists love to find. There's a couple of them up here. I'm going to use, it can help define an edge because this part is cut off and it's a half curve. This one over here, this one over here. So now those are in place. So for the most part, we pretty much have it. So basically in the end is what you want. If possible, no line. I still have a little line. I would get rid of those lines ultimately. Your shadow shapes want to be one even value when you place them on. Your edges these are lost edges, as we talked much about. Don't be afraid of losing those edges. You want sharp edges where there are sharp edges. Again, you want to take your time a little more than what I just did, but for the sake of time in this demonstration, I'm going with it pretty darn fast. I'm going to take and add, there's an interesting little dark for his eyelashes, darks on the lights that we can place on, and it would look like that. If the next step, I'm going to show you one couple little marks, but do not do it in yours, or if you do it very subtle. This would be separated, whereas the back of the head. Now I'm just going to do it with a little bit of line, just so that you see and don't get scared with this first process. This would come in, and if you want to go into yours just very little, like I'm doing here, and separating where is that back, and I'm doing it with a line variation, you could do the same. The last project we did had a little bit of line variation. That's actually the edge of her head. Now the eyes look better in relation to where they would be. This is her shoulder. So, I mean, if you did do that, you could go back very little and you could make a line. Do not rub, just keep a little bit of a line. So then your eye will see, oh yeah, that's the edge, but it still connects. The idea is to connect and link things together. It's ultimately better then to come back and then to make a subtle separation in there with the line from the shadow, and then you get a harmonious idea, okay? But again, this part of it, just use a little bit of a line variation. Do not rub things, do not change values, a little bit of separation so that you can see where the objects ultimately would be. So what you're going to do is turn this video off, and you're going to set up your own still life. Take your time with crafting these shadows. I can't mention it enough. This is the first stage before we render or model anything. And then once you're done with this, come back to this video, and I'm going to show you what to do with a group of objects that have 3 different values. And I'll see you then. Well, welcome back, class. Hopefully your first project went well with the values, because now I'm going to introduce a new problem. So with this new problem, we're still going to work with only two values. So you're still going to work with the white of your paper and a dark shadow. The dark shadow, as I was talking about Tuesday in class, could just be black, or it could be dark gray, or what you saw me do, as long as it's just one value and not two or three. So the new problem is the objects you're seeing up here are now different from the last ones, other than the ball that's there. But the big difference to them is this one's black, this is a middle tone, and this is white. So when you look around for some objects for this next project you're about to do, you want to find three different values, preferably black, preferably something a middle tone, preferably something white would be ideal. I'm just going to keep the white of this wall back here. Sometimes I would put a middle tone background. You could do that if you have a shirt to hang up back there. You could do that. I wouldn't use black just because this is it would just disappear, but a middle tone background could work. Now, the reason I want to show you three different values and how the light and dark is going to work and how you're going to translate it is because next Tuesday you guys are going to be drawing from an artist, and you're going to be looking at the handout I gave you on Tuesday, and you're going to be picking a painting, and the painting that you're going to be doing will have values in it, and there'll be whites, there'll be blacks, there'll be middle tones, and so I want you to know how to look at those different values and reduce it down to two values. And so basically the way that it's going to work is this. The white that's on the white object obviously is light, and so it remains white. The shadow, we're going to make it black. The black object, the light, we discard it, and we're going to make the whole black object silhouetted black. There will be no light on it. Our middle tone object, the light, will become white like this, or like this, even though it's not, because we're reducing it to two values. The shadow on the pair is then going to be reduced to the dark. So basically the light on a white is white, the light on a middle tone is light, the shadow will be dark on all of them, and the exception is on the black object, the light becomes gone. It just becomes dark. We just get rid of it. So your black becomes a silhouetted shape. So that's how it's going to look in the end. So is what I'm going to do is like we did before. I'm going to sketch this out. I'm going to sketch it out, then put the frame of reference on it so that you can kind of decide how you want to do that. The cast shadows now are underneath. So I changed the lighting, as you know. Hopefully all of you observed that. On this one, definitely light it from above if you can get it close. Hopefully you got a spotlight that you can use. Because these cast shadows are going to become important. I'm going to connect them to the objects. They're going to create lost edges. So with that in mind, I am going to start with this. And I'm going to start with the pear as a general shape. So what I'm going to do is place a ball. Why a ball? Because the bottom of it is kind of like a ball. And I'm going to alter that shape in a moment. This, for me, has the axis line. Like I mentioned from the very beginning of the class, what's the axis line? There's the vertical. As you can see, it is far from vertical. And my angle is tilted this way. So if I do that and then place an axis line in here like this, I can say, is that close to this? And then I can say, yes, it is. And then I can look at the top part of the pear and say, this sits on top of a ball. So what I could do is come up with the curve as if I cut that off, and then from that begin to curve in my sides and say there's a top, and come up with a generalized feel for that pear at that axis line. And this curve, of course, how it's going to sit on top of it is important. I'm looking kind of down on it, so this is my close point is lower than my edges. It tells me something about perspective. So we start any kind of object, as all of you know, because we've talked about these things, in a very generic sense. There's a top to it, so I want that top to be shown. And so I'm looking down on it, so what is it? I can always go back and say this is more of a curve this way. It becomes a little more of a concave there. This now adjoins to the pair. Now, when I look at the pair, I see it more angular, so I'm going to use straight line. So now I'm going to put a straight line for what I'm seeing. I see this going this way as a plane, this going this way, and this one is starting from back here, not quite as abrupt out as I did that one, because there's a little variation to it, of course. This way, and this way. So it gives me a little bit of ideas of planes when I start to get involved with those planes. I am going to, at this early stage, even though I don't have the others in there, I'm going to look at this angle according to the planes I'm seeing it, and I'm going to start to think a little bit of the shadow angle even now, just so I can show you. So for me, there's an angle here, and I see the shadow. So again, the more dramatic you can make these angles, the better. So it's telling me this is, the shadow is going to go that way. It comes up for me on this surface, almost vertical, and then it begins to cross over the ball, this bottom part, like this. Again, that's a little more exaggerated than what it actually is. And this starts to come up, and then it's going to move around and up. And I have to decide, like you have to decide, do I want this shadow to be 50%? You don't, even if it is. Have one side wider than the other, either the shadow bigger than the other bigger than it. But they do not want to be the same. It's just an aesthetic thing that artists are always searching for. We try to keep things away from being 50-50, divided down the middle. So now I've got this narrower and this wider. That definitely is better. The stem of the pear comes out of there. So draw like we did with the ellipses. Draw an ellipse up there, and then begin to watch the direction. Now I'm going to take it and say it comes up not quite straight, but this way, and then it makes a radical bend to the right. There's an end to it. You won't see the ellipse going that way, but I do, and then it angles once and twice and connects. So turn everything you do into shapes, okay? Shapes are important. You want to feel that they're sitting on things, because eventually there's a shadow on it and it wants to be wide enough, and you want to be able to construct that. So now is what I'm going to do, like what we've done in the past. I'm going to look at the bottom of the vase, not the wide point of the curve. I could look at the wide point of the curve and say, how low is it? And it's about this low, which would put the middle of the vase, or my vertical lines. I'm going to check it out with my stick. So actually lower than I thought. So here. So that does that. How much of it do I see on the right side of the pear? I see about this much of it, and maybe a little less. So I'm trying to figure out how wide is it on this side. So what's nice is if you have one object down there, it gives you everything else you do is being worked off of it. So I'm going to do that. The other side of the pear, I'm going to see this coming through, and then I'm going to say how much space do I see. I actually see less than that side, so I'm going to do it like this. So again, we want variation. So if I can keep this side bigger than that side, that's better than being in the center. So I'm going to exaggerate it a little more, and I'm going to even make it a touch less, not a lot. But so let's do that, okay? So I'm going to juggle it because I want the design to work. I'm going to bring this over a little more. I want to make it real apparent that this object is wider, a little wider on this side, say, than this side, okay? And then it changes up here. Now, I know this has gotten bigger than I wanted it to, so I'm going to have to bring this up. It might be taller than this, but I'm only going this high, okay? So that's going to be the very top of my object. So I'm going to do this. So I'm putting it in a notional space, basically. We know that if this is narrower than this, but I boxed it out, okay? So what I want to do is look for this ellipse. And that ellipse, I'm probably going to make this not as tall as it actually is in reality, but I know this line is above this line. And so I'm going to place in this line. There's a plane break and a plane break. which means there's going to be a plane break for me here. And this is going to be my, maybe I'll lower it a little bit. So I'll do that and keep this as a plane break. So what I'm going to do is put an ellipse in here. Okay, so there's my first ellipse. This is representing this ellipse. It's climbing up kind of to my eye level. I'm looking down on it still a fair amount. So it would be close to what I've got it. So place in your ellipse. Now, some of you in the past, when I go through and grade your work, you get confused with this line. This line is running through, and it's telling me the widest point of my ellipse, but the ellipse in the reality comes down to here, if you follow me. This is my guideline of saying this is my object. My ellipse eventually is going to curve down this way. Okay, this one I'm not going to draw it through the pear. I'm just going to place it in, all right? So this ellipse would be, it's better for you guys to draw it right through the pear, all right, if you had the same setup. So now is what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, where are these sides? And I'm going to look at it and say, how far in is it? And that's about in as far as this. So is what I want to do off the notional space, I can keep it equal because it's a symmetrical object. So this works very nice. That's why the notional space works good. So I've got to come up with an ellipse here and an ellipse here. Technically, this is an ellipse. This is another one here at the top of the highlight. That's a plane. It's about halfway there. So what I'm going to do is maybe go back to my original idea, and I'm going to do this. This is my center. Maybe it's not my center. Now that I look at it, I want to check and make sure. Actually, it's not too bad. I'll keep it. And so what I'm going to do is put an ellipse here. And then I'm going to put another one below it. And so I'm going to get rid of the overlapping. So this becomes my top. Okay, so everybody can see that. And I'm going to clean this up just a little bit so you can see it in the tape. So there's my top part. I am going to attempt to put a third one in there right here. It would be wider, like all the way out to here. Okay, so I don't need the top parts that I placed in. I need the lower part, of course. So I'm going to do that. So what I can do then is this is my lower ellipse. So now I know that this curves this way to this point. This curves this way. And then it takes a slight angle down this way. So I'm out and over. So I'm going to leave it like that because this is going to all turn into a silhouette in the end. But is what I want. I still need you to construct these shapes. We need to know what the edges actually look like in terms of the object that you're drawing. So it's good practice to do this over and over. I'm just trying to get this a little more equal to this. Okay, so the last part of this is this ball. So I'm going to look and say, how high is that ball? And I can see that it's about this high. So I'm going to place that in. And then we're going to say, how low is the ball? And I'm going to run a horizontal line across. And it's actually, for me, you would think it would be lower than the black object, but it's actually further back than the front. So it's like here. So that falls in this neighborhood, that ball. Okay. The other thing is, where is the center for me? So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to guess at it this way. So you want to set it up like this, as we talked about doing a ball before. So find center, because the ball is a circle, and it's equal all the way around. So if I do that to this, it should overlap this black object, and it's not because I ultimately moved it over a little, but I'm going to juggle this over a bit because I do want it to overlap. So I'm going to do that and relocate my center. You know, play with these things. You want to get them accurate. None of us, a lot of times, hit it right the first time. So I'm going to do that, and now it overlaps a little bit. That's nice. I want it to overlap. For me, it does overlap, and I juggle that side a little bit in order to make the sides different around the pear. So now I have to kind of juggle that a little bit. Here's my edges. Like on a plane, I'm going to keep these lines distinct. So when I make the curve of the ball, they don't come to a point, right? That's one trick a lot of us use. So when I bring it around, I know I've got to bring it to that line, and I've got to bring it to that edge, and that's going to come around, and that's going to come around. From where I'm standing, it always looks lopsided. So I'm going to check and see what I've got going, and I see where it is. Okay, so my sides are a little wider than my top. So what I'm going to do is bring it up just ever so slightly and bring it down a little bit, just to even it out. It's hard to draw a ball if you're not in the center of it. So I'm off to the side, and it makes it very challenging to try to get this thing. But I'm not after the perfection. Basically, I'm after trying to get a general shape. So with that in mind, I'm locating this corner again. The corner for me overlaps the ball, which is here. And how low is it from the pear? So I'm using relational measurements. Keep this thing parallel to your eyes. When I do that from my angle, it comes below the pear to here. So that I lined it up this way, which is here. I went this way, how low? So it gave me exactly where I want it to be, okay? When I look at where this point of it is for me in relation to the ball, if I look at the center of the ball, it's to the right of it. It's way over here. And so do these work when I do that? When I put this angle in there, is it the same? Sometimes you get it lucky and it works, and this time it worked. So this angle is the angle I set up, and so this angle should be the same. I'm going to make it just a little wider here in the front. So that's going to be the angle that I'm looking for. And so now I'm going to go in the other direction and say this is parallel to my eyes, the corner goes up. Okay, so if that's true, parallel to my eyes, the corner goes up. The question is how far up, and where is this corner? So with that in mind, I look at the other corner and keep this parallel to my eyes like we all did before, and it comes that far into the pear, and then how far out is it from the object? So I'm measuring how far it is out from the object, and it's way out here. So I've got to keep that height, and I've got to keep that width. And if that's right, then this angle should be very close, and it's very close. So then we can strike it in. And then this angle, if you watch it, there's a little difference to it back here because of the perspective, and then we'll have that angle in there. So then we have, you're going to have to put the edge of your table in as well. So now we've got our objects. So now is what I'm going to do is, there's a shadow on the wall for me, and so I'm going to use that shadow. So I'm going to put my box here, and I'm going to end it here. And on this side, I don't need all of this. So I'm going to keep, again, try to think of it aesthetically. More space, less space. Don't have it dead center. We talked a little bit about design in this class. So we're going to do this. I know my outline isn't perfectly straight, but you get the idea. So with that in mind, is what I'm going to do is find now my shadow shapes. And then I'm going to block this out real quick, and you will be on your way to doing the same with your drawing. So one shadow I have to consider is here. And it hits the edge, and it angles back this way to the pear like this for me. For me, actually, when I look at it, it's a horizontal line. So I think that's pretty accurate. That goes in there. I get another one off the front of the pear going this way, and it runs into the edge, which will all be in shadow. I get another one on this side, which runs this way. So, is what I'm going to do, like I did before, I'm going to get rid of this line because it's all shadow, and I'm going to get rid of this line because this is where it connects to the pair, right? So just so I don't get lost and have those lines divide things for me. So now is what I'm going to do is take this shape and shade it. And I'm going to bring it through this way. See, now I'm coming up with there's some interesting shapes. So now this shape cuts into that one, and this one goes this way. And again, these shapes, just like we talked about in the last drawing, you want to craft them carefully. Edges are going to be important. All of this is in shadow. Follow these. Follow them carefully. This is my object behind the black object. Now, I am going to watch the shadow on the wall. So for me, it makes a curve right here. And then it comes up, let's just say like this. And then it makes another curve radically down because of the distortion. And this is going to hit the edge, which worked out well. I wanted it. You know, whenever you can hit an edge in the background, when you hit an edge, it creates a shape back here. So artists are constantly looking for shapes. This is all light shape in the background. However, this dark would come down. This would technically be dark, but I'm going to leave it light. This edge now is gone, and it comes into this. These edges are gone. So I'm going to block this out rather quickly. I would have to watch the top of this thing. It flows through. There's a shadow here. This is in shadow, which means all of this is gone. This edge is important. How it's designed, so I get a nice shape going here in between my shadows. Block this out. I'm going to end it there. So we get a nice light shape there. Eventually we'll go back and watch our edges. This stage, craft your shadows well. The insides, keep them nice and even with the charcoal. Again, this is divine charcoal I'm using. So, in here it's going to be ultimately light or white. So I will go on through the process here. We almost got it. I'm going to find the shadow here. And it's very low. And it comes up. Strong curve. I want to try to get a feel for this curve. Bolder I can make this curve. In other words, where this line hits that edge at a strong angle, the more successful the ball will look to be round. Do not want a straight line. This ball, I've got it overlapping the black object, so that's going to be white. This will be white. And my background will be white back there. So here's what we're going to do, is what would happen with this. All those lines would go away now. All the lines are gone. We get a silhouette. That's how it should be. On yours as well, whatever the object is. This actually overlaps, but it doesn't really matter now that I look at it. It's in shadow. trying to make much of that edge, didn't realize it'd all be in shadow. It's a strong reflective light there, so actually it's just a shadow on a white object, so it looks a lot lighter. But we're connecting it together. We're connecting it together with this, and I get a little light in between there for me. You're not going to see it, but I'm glad it worked out from my angle that there'd be a little light between the ball and the black object. Otherwise, they'd all tie together, which is okay if it actually did. But I like the light shape there. So in other words, I'm going to strengthen this. I'm not going to make this black because it's just too much charcoal flying everywhere here. So, but you get the idea. Yours can be black. Actually, I should really watch what I'm doing because that's light. So you keep that area light, and this dark would do what I've got it doing there. This is going to link together, however. These edges, keep them clean at the moment. There's my little light triangle. I like the light triangle in the design. This would all be black, of course. Okay, so I'm going to finish this massing stage real quickly, and then I'm going to show you a little bit of something with the edges. But this is how it's going to work with 3 values. It's reduced to 2. Because you're going to be working from an artist print, and you're going to be confronting the same sorts of situations. Because you're going to have more than just white objects in those paintings that you're going to be drawing from. So at this stage then is what you would do.